Like Gursky, Yuan's poems are concerned with that troubling landscape of a desire reduced to its materials, impoverished by its constant gratification, and connected to particular human subjects only insofar as those subjects can themselves be transformed into consumables, can be endlessly packaged, repackaged, replicated, and sold in the manner of Gursky's 99-cent delights. In Ashore, Yuan writes about a family gathering, but the family is noted only by titles, the poem's fullness achieved by its lists of things, ivory pipes and braided bracelets, and the poem's melancholy comes in the form of fullness, ending with the uncomfortable, "We ate more than was expected of us. We ate more." But unlike Gursky, Yuan's poems point to the specificity of a certain kind of spectacle and desire, that of ethnicity or exoticism. Gursky's appeal to our desire is one that briefly allows us to wallow in the prospect of abundance via the acquisition of abundant goods. Yuan goes further, positing also a troubling desire for acquisition of difference via the acquisition of different commodities. A materialization of ethnicity, of geography, of culture, of which she is always a critic, always a participant. Take, for example, a section from the long poem, New City, in which she looks at a photograph of a gutted building in the middle of a shopping square. Yuan describes what made it interesting visually. The buildings line up and point to a very still and rectangular sky, to a point of stillness, of emptiness. Above a street she has described as full of familiar things made slightly strange. The software in the street is free, the popcorn comes in boxes, the children's bouncing balls are square, and there is a special device to flip your hair into a ponytail. What's interesting is that stillness to Yuan. What's interesting to Yuan is that stillness, not the fiction of difference that those materials of commerce offer up. And even while she ratchets back from the hectic shopping scene to dwell in the quiet space of the photograph, she builds her poem around the story of that scene's promises and ends with the materiality of the photograph itself. When she shows the photograph to someone else, that someone does not see the speaker's relationship to the meaning of the scene, does not see the fragment of an intimate relationship between the people that it contains, but instead responds with a bit of Chinese, quote, which turns out to be the sign for the dried meat shop in the center of the road. The photograph itself, worried over by the speaker as a talisman of a narrative past, of an uncertain future, she looks at it after the morning after we fought, turns out not to be the scene, but the marker of that scene's performance of exotic commodity. In the sunken city center, in the cafe, she writes in a later section of the poem, a shared attraction of wounded language, animation in slow motion on the department store's big screen, I feel somehow at rest. One lives inside this wounded language, around which all scenes revolve, out of which all wounds are made. Language is the landscape we're dumping ourselves into, a formal terrain in which ethnicity or localized cultural practices serve only to make the poet, the reader, and the skilled factory workers into the inmates of geography. Though we were always and remain also the inmates of our learned desire. This is smart, skillful, crucial work, which catalogs the losses and elisions of cultural recession in the face of globalization. It is also, and importantly, beautiful, mythic, full of stories. And so it went on like that, she writes, the legend much longer than the map. Angie Yuan studies late imperial and modern Chinese literature in the Department of East Asian Languages and Cultures here at Berkeley. Her poetry has recently appeared in the Boston Review, Fence, and A Public Space. Please give her a warm welcome.
Thank you. That was really illuminating and sort of dark too, but thank you. This poem is called Notes on Exoticism. I am a lifeguard at the Community House of Horrors. I enjoy the translation of modernity in relation to public bathhouses. We say culture, and what we really mean is beauty, carved out in the curator's rendition of sadness. Houndstooth and ivory buttons, liberty in the choice of commodities. I'm interested in the beauty of humor. I describe my work in relation to others only because I'm in a room with you and you can't keep your eyes off. I'm taken by threats at 8 a.m, grappling with swaths of graffiti. I'm really interested in you being lonely, waking up to a windstorm, slamming pottery. We are walking. How is this not like the blade that cuts through the voice of another? Extant theories of exotic birds, exotic scenery. I'm immersed in the production of beauty, phone cards of domestic rates and many countries. I am happy, overwhelmed when I touch your shoulder, and so keep my hand there, extending a large territory. I carry a burden on the road, on my back, at the waist, and pause at the recycling bin, breathing moonness across disciplines. I am struck by ethnicity. And this poem is called Typography. The pieces that broke off the Song Dynasty horse as it was crated from Hong Kong to Norfolk, he had carefully glued back before encasing the beautiful but damaged equine in the center of the living room. Dinner was laid down with pins, a glass bowl of chrysanthemum petals over a prism of rain. Outside, the workmen had left a mess on the porch, the wood a raw yellow in moonlight, a kind of rough calculus of the sun. So far from that language had we come. I lived first in the city, and later in the middle of the city, on the 21st floor, overlooking a zoo, a menagerie of imported birds who mated in evening. And so it went on like that, the legend much longer than the map. So I've been sort of in hiding for a few years. But when I wrote these poems, I was doing I was working on some translations of Song and Ming Dynasty poets. And so actually in this poem, I have to admit that I've ripped off a few lines of some Song and Ming Dynasty poets. But my translations were never very philologically accurate. And so I figure they should, maybe they could appear in this poem in a different form. So this poem's called Ashore. We pulled our boat close to the bank. We laid down an indigo blanket. The girl with a fistful of rubber bands drifting out among the lotuses, how to pass through, was song. We called the others to come sing with us, those who could rhyme, the famous whores, the moon dumping itself onto the shore. We drifted out into the square. We laid down an enormous blanket bought from a family of 5 who lived off the mountain. The ivory pipes and braided bracelets beside us depleted as in a store. The girl looked up from her sewing station, how to pass through. We took the elevator up and, recognizing only second cousins, climbed back into our father's accent, laying out a clean sheet so he could rest. Our second sister's husband, who collected ceramic broken off horses and for whom we felt responsible, welcomed us ashore. We ate more than was expected of us. We ate more. It's going faster than expected. So I'll have a quick drink of water. This poem is called Antenna, or Antennae. A rose blooming into a third-floor apartment. Venus gathering her dress behind a man facing the forest. Her heel, a flood. Because someone dropped a bomb here, the sirens, the curfew, the boys with their hands in pockets ready to go the 3/4 of a mile home. What then is real when the video will shoot the leg from the body, than the body. We built ourselves, the rough waters, imperfect sky, a grenade looming over the ocean, this man whose heart is a birdcage, who will crawl through scenery and love with the T-shaped tree limb so thin so that he can remember. We won't be seeing these parts again. Forest, rough ocean, my uncle waving to me from a very large ship, a pleasure boat in the vicinity of a garden. This poem's called DMZ, which stands for Demilitarized Zone. And when I wrote it, I was thinking of the DMZ of Vietnam. And I was just talking to my friend who's from South Korea, and she was telling me this really weird story about how you can tour the DMZ of between North and South Vietnam and take buses and go into museums and, actually go into this one space where there's a table and people are facing each other, and there's just a line. And anyway, it's very weird. So when I wrote this poem, I thought of it as a very imagined place, the DMZ, and so conveniently the speaker of this poem is a horse. DMZ. Where they sought their fortune, others looked, traveled southward, and I, horse, loved the no-good love. Kept down deep the canyon, burned a little meat. In a minimal position of right, carved a hyacinth, got thinking and idealism huge, got marred too, got down beneath the moss covering. Mama said a reputation of emigre, a colonial business, dreams, dreams. Made straight for the bridge. It was a dark gulf, a dark thing I got consummated. The left and the others agreed, stopping short of, just the other side of, carved a kind of pear there, green, green. So I guess I'm forced to read this poem, which is the only other poem I have. And so I'm going to finish with this. It's sort of untitled, but I thought of a title could be, well, I'm going to leave it untitled, I guess, but it sort of the idea of living in a new place and feeling very displaced, but also trying to build a relationship or a friendship in that place. It's of living better, a talk show, 3 gunshots in the middle of the night against each other, a kind of argument. I had tried to live at the edge, the deep end of it. She stood in Sao Paulo outside a subway hole, talking to me with her night. We started before we suffered, so we could experiment a long time, rushing into a city without comment. As through a rainstorm of the eye, we walked and walked through rural landscapes, wheeling luggage across, thinking he drinks too much. Language opens in such a way, our talks, taking care, begin amicably, transpire territorially, leave us with us. If he can see me through being daring from the start, depositing little stars in the atmosphere and running, is seeing right? Or there's a question on her face. It starts from the eyes but never reaches her mouth. I can hear the substitution in her voice. What world? Thank you.
Hi. In the last few years, North American poets and their readers have shown a renewed interest in, to put it bluntly, disgust, vulgarity, and shock. Part of this has to do with a general revival of attitudes associated with early 20th century surrealism and its fellow travelers, whose influence on American poetry so far has been, if not small, then mediated by a welter of other influences or limited in its extent. I don't really have an argument about these developments, only a hunch. It's not surprising, at least not to me, that in the past few years so many books speak from the point of view of damaged bodily life, fashioning from excrement and wound a blazon for some enduring presence. We live, after all, in superbly disgusting and vulgar times, in a culture underwritten by the murder of probably 1 million Iraqis and Afghanis, the extrajudicial torture and imprisonment of thousands, and a vigorously cruel neoliberalism that augurs ecological and economic catastrophe of an order I find difficult to hold in mind. In many ways, poetry, which is so behind the times as to constitute a sort of ultimate avant-garde, may just now be extensively getting around to the kinds of things that artists were up to in the 70s and 80s. And I should say, just qualifying that, obviously lots of people have been working this terrain for a long time. Then as now, with a few exceptions, most of this work disappoints. Unlike the work of Ariana Reines and a few other younger writers like Lara Glina, Man Boyers, and Alyssa Wolfe, picking up on threads left them by Alice Notley or Kathy Acker, today's barbaric yops are essentially anodyne, yelps rather, which dress up a thoroughly middle-class standpoint with a few flourishes of bad boy or bad girl edginess, because, as it turns out, in the gentrification belts of America's cities these days, this is the currency in which distinction trades. It's a boutique objection. You can only watch the bourgeoisie shock itself so many times before feeling a little bored. Ariana Reines' two very different books, The Cow and Coeur de Leon, are exceptional, first of all, because there is none of the specious dialectic of transgression, confession, and redemption that you get with Christianity and its apostates. She's a Baudelaire translator as well as something of a scholar of French literature from what I can make out. But however much Baudelaire is a tutelary spirit here, there is no attempt to resurrect the corpse of aesthetic beauty by making the corpse into an aesthetic ideal. That too is dead, doubly dead. She's not a tourist, but a realist of the emotions, attuned to whatever conditions in emergency, as she calls it, will allow her to persist. The cow with its 4 assiduous stomachs is exemplary. The book can digest it all. Thus, those brutalized objects of industrial cattle ranching become a figure not only for the precarity of bodily life, primarily female in modernity, primarily female in her book, not in modernity, but also for a kind of dumb stubbornness and intractability that may be the only form of courage we have left. In an essay about the book, Reines refers to it as a vat of mushy ideas and disgusting feelings, and says that she has resented the cleanliness and elegance of tight and perfect writing. Such resentment, though, is not because elegance remains difficult for her. Indeed, in both books, she manages with seeming ease an Ashberian language of refinement, modulation, extension, and complication that keeps pace with the best of today's elegance. Many of the poems in The Cow began not with an outburst of potty-mouth vulgarity, but with affects and perceptions that are delicate, complex, and dynamic. As it turns out, though, all of this emotional precision does not mean emotional accuracy, and so the hum of thoughts evaded in the mind converts, one way or another, into the mushy material existence its articulations have avoided. And what better figure for this than the cow? Especially right now, as people in Haiti and Bangladesh and Egypt and elsewhere are starved to death by the diabolical conjuncture of climate change, oil prices, the farce of biofuel, and price gouging by commodities traders fleeing the U.S. housing market. Our system for producing and distributing food is madness, calculated madness, and the life of the cow in all of its brutality is a crucial part of it. The Cow makes me want to work harder to try and imagine a world in which pleasure is not contingent upon a logic of sacrifice or surplus on scarcity. We're lucky to have the chance to do that imaginative work, and we're lucky to have Ariana Reines here to read for us.
Thank you so much. I'm inclined to stoop because I'm wearing my high shoes because lecterns are always much too high for me, and now I'm going to take them off because I might actually be too tall. Thank you, Jasper and Jeffrey and Hillary and Angie. This is really fascinating, and I'm learning a lot very quickly, I hope. I'm just going to read a bit from The Cow and then a bit from Coeur de Leon because that's all I brought with me. And I have to confess that I haven't worked out an order or chosen which poems I'm going to read. So if I start reading one that makes me feel uncomfortable, I might stop. I'll try not to, though. I might as well get comfortable and talk to you a little bit first. The Cow, some of you may know, is the first book of the Quran. And it's also an interesting figure in the work of Gertrude Stein, who, from whom I took an epigraph for the book, from Tender Buttons. It is dangerous to suck, the danger of sucking. Sucking as in being really bad at something, but also, of course, what babies do, or lovers. Milk debt. The day is a fume. At starboard, a white curdle, which is the moon. The day has a hallmark, the night also. Blue winter air. The chief leaf, which is a firm clasp on the smoke of days that keep on destroying my mind. It is not easy to be honest because it is impossible to be complete. The end. Font. He said, "Now I'm going to shit into your hand." Another voice appeared. "You don't know me, but I know you. The emergency takes place. It's a hole. Nobody knows how they got there. Anyway, I think it better to be a bassoon getting blown. This hand is my hand. I could have been better, but now it's too late." I was up all night writing a eulogy for a dear friend, Mark Anthony Wilson, who died a week and a half ago. He killed himself. And I feel it's important to say this because I can't stop thinking about it as I read to you. And I'm very grateful and thrilled to be here with you. And this happens to be the day of Mark's memorial service that took place in New York. And it's so strange, like, how easy it is to put considerable distance between yourself and events. And because of the suddenness of his death and that thing that Tibetans say about the soul hovering near the body shortly after it dies, I keep thinking about just like space, like the dead are just like somewhere. I'm so materialist now, I realize it because my friend has died, that like, I just cannot, I find it very, very difficult to think of a place where he might be, his material soul. And yet I'm absolutely sure he must be somewhere, just far. And I also have this weird feeling that like the dead are like, it's like people are so different from each other as they live. And I have this weird feeling that dying is like deciding to be less different from others, like deciding to be similar to all of the dead. Because once there's this strange thing that like, it's like writing kind of like I just can't get around it. I can't get around it. Like there's no way to enclose difference, and there's somehow no way for me to like deal with this receding feeling I have. It's been a week and a half since my friend was alive, and it's like he's becoming like all the rest of them, all the other dead people. I don't know. Anyway, decorticated. 2 prawns in the night, rakes, all wrapped in red. These are ways of budding at little getting, a hickory, a hind, undisturbed lands. Such soft songs were sung, having a nation. Strands of the infomercial mommy, and the recital is starting because we are American. Lay deep in reverie, 2 troughs into which he dumped me forever, forever. The sweet women are coming because we are American. A quack made a cake, a hickory, a hind, all wrapped in red, because we are American. There is no order in this poem because it is mine own. I hate the song, so I can lie down and take it, take it. Now I'm really good at sucking cock. Lights in the herring, lights in the quivering river. Lately I'm really good at sucking cock. So quivers the river, so run the hinds. We gather at the river, there is an order. It is mine. We become the river's chump. Having a nation is as good as having a language, less possible even, skulls on the water. Then, less possible than the air that happens without your doing anything. Eat me, silence of eternity. Like Angie's poem with Ming and Sung Dynasty, lines kind of translated or loosely transubstantiated. The cow has a lot of stolen things in it. Not that you stole, but I stole. Maybe you stole too. I love my emergency. An alabaster fidget is impossible to imagine. Nevertheless, they spent a long time wanting to fuck statues and having hair that didn't move when a wave came. The wave rises to a point and pierces the moon. It is night. I have a jaw which could be a gunnel. I have the night which is hemp cord in my hard hand. Nobody fucking understands. When the building coughed up the white rubble of everything, whitening us with its dust, a little blood on our lips, we were the reals, dead mimes, or stained minutes. This is a permanent poem. If I don't fuck today, I'll die. This is a poem the size of almost nothing, a blotter made rude by its inexorable silkening. A wobble ate canned pie filling and, like the centuries, grew into an angry auger. All time is a piece of shit, nothing but a warning. So among the things that the cow steals from is the Merck Veterinary Manual and a few animal husbandry manuals, something from Texas A&M University. I forget the name of it. That's kind of like my favorite. My favorite part really is this part from the Merck Veterinary Manual, which I'll read to you. I find it beautifully written. Item. A cow is not sacred, a cow is taboo. It is not that you have to worship her, you just have to not kill her if you are Hindu. In Sanskrit, transliterated, she is called aganya, that which may not be slaughtered. She is also called go. A cow is a name for a heavy woman or a woman with slow eyes. Cow is a common epithet for a slow woman or a clumsy woman, a woman with a foul smell, a thick-lipped woman, an unintelligent woman, a woman whose features possess a disturbing combination of ugliness and sensuality, a woman whose desire to fuck extends the desire of others to fuck her, also to have a cow. One who is ridiculous, inherently ridiculous, irrespective of context, an impassive onlooker, or what do you call the meat around a cunt, often a witness, silent. A cow is a ruminant. She grazes and ambles. She stands still, is flatulent, lazy, patient. She is named a ruminant not only because her relaxed and melancholy demeanor lend to her a philosophical, if gormandizing aspect, but because of the uniqueness of her digestive system. The 4 compartments of her stomach are the rumen, the reticulum, the omasum, and the abomasum. The rumen, the largest compartment, contains billions of bacteria, protozoa, molds, and yeasts. It is because of these microorganisms that the cow is able to digest large amounts of grass. The bacteria and protozoa inside of the rumen digest what the cow eats. They produce volatile fatty acids and supply most of the energy on which the cow lives. These microorganisms also produce protein and nitrogen and vitamins B and C. The reticulum has a honeycomb-like lining and functions as a trap for foreign objects the cow might ingest unwittingly, for example, rocks or nails or pieces of wire. The omasum is also called the book, owing to its many leaf-like folds. It is the gateway to the abomasum and aids in the reabsorption of water and fatty acids, though its complete function is unknown. The abomasum is also called the true stomach, as its function resembles that of the human stomach, producing acid and some enzymes. It is worth noting that the cow's digestive system has been a mystery and a wonder for many centuries. Courses in animal husbandry and agricultural best practices continue to make use, for demonstration purposes, of a live cow into whose side a porthole has been opened and onto which opening a window has been fitted, so that the curious student can observe with his or her own eyes at least one stage of the animal's magnificent digestion. The mouth of a healthy cow produces between 20 and 35 gallons of saliva each day. Some sources say 50. This is to moisten her food, which is grass. The cow does not eat protein, she makes it. Her stomach turns grass into her body, as in meat, which is good to eat. One thinks of a cow living on grass, that is, one imagines the cow living literally upon it. But a cow does not so much, not in the United States. In the United States, after she has been alive about 6 months, and if she is not one of the luxury grass-fed varietals, the cow lives in a stall on a feedlot in Kansas, for example, like William Burroughs. She has got to shit where she eats, in the stall. In the stall where she is fed, feed. Feed has many things in it, for example, corn, lots of corn, and until recently, but maybe still, rendered animal for extra protein, also antibiotics. The antibiotics make it possible for the cow to digest the corn, which without antibiotics would kill her, but which with antibiotics makes her fat, which is to say tender, marbled, health. That goes on for a bit, but I'm gonna move. One of the figures in the cow is Marguerite Duras, and I feel it important to mention her because I have rather unkindly referred to her as the patron saint of hag writers. And I've said that quite proudly, but a dear friend of mine pointed out that Marguerite was not always a hag, and after all, it's true. She was a very beautiful young woman once upon a time. And sort of the figurations and effects of her own beauty and its loss are very important to her. But what I love about Marguerite is the way that she leans right into her own loss and devastation, and the way she describes it with absolute candor. It becomes very sexy, I think. And it's like how that guy, Yuan Andreas Steiner, like totally fell for her with her ravaged or lacerated face. In any case, she's in the cow because it's a kind of thank you, I would say. I have to get to the other side of the animal. Rendered. Livestock mortality is a tremendous source of organic matter. A typical fresh carcass contains approximately 32% dry matter, of which 52% is protein, 41% is fat, and 6% is ash. Rendering offers several benefits to food, animal, and poultry production operations, including providing a source of protein for use in animal feed, and providing a hygienic means of disposing of fallen and condemned animals. The end products of rendering have economic value and can be stored for long periods of time. Using proper processing conditions, final products will be free of pathogenic bacteria and unpleasant odors. Across her, upending the weight of her, I have to be finding out a grammar, how to be opener, sod open, easy, open like a grammar, a dust of light the air carries. What is a night upended? A carcass in which nothing is left over. What is a night upended? Open, a hole where the head disgorges its body. The emergence of BSE, bovine spongiform encephalopathy, has been largely attributed to cattle being fed formulations that contain prion-infected MBM, meat, and bone meal. As Dormant, 2002, explained, TSE, transmissible spongiform encephalopathy, agents, also called prions, are generally regarded as being responsible for various fatal neurodegenerative diseases, including Creutzfeldt-Jakob disease in humans and BSE in cattle. According to UK DEFRA, 2000, United Kingdom Department for Environment, Food and Rural Affairs, epidemiological work carried out in 1988 revealed that compounds of animal feed containing infective MBM were the primary mechanism by which BSE was spread throughout the UK. Thus, the rendering industry played a central role in the BSE story. Experts subsequently concluded that changes to rendering processes in the early 1980s might have led to the emergence of the disease. Concentrate. The sorrow is humiliated. Downer cow. The term is frequently applied to a mature dairy cow that is still recumbent 3 hours after calving, despite treatment for hypocalcemia. A second type of involuntary sternal recumbency is encountered less commonly in cattle of any age under conditions not associated with parturition, and for which the most likely etiology is trauma. Downer cows that are able to actively crawl are often referred to as creepers and are considered to have a more favorable prognosis than inactive animals. The cause of their recumbency is more often than not elusive, even to an experienced clinician. Furthermore, inexperienced clinicians may miss an obvious cause if they do not adopt a systematic approach to diagnosis. You learn to subtract yourself from it, and a night happens, like the night that goes on inside your organs because it is so dark in there. A night that knows you and how you are and how it is going to be. A night that is packed down like a hard brick of hash or an opium made of the underside of everything that has ever glittered, which you can feel, which you know, which you carry with you because it's you, the dukes you are not going to put up to the real, the way you are going to keep on knowing what you know and going as you go, and how you will never totally disrobe it, how it will never turn completely to smoke, how it will never intoxicate you enough, and how your substrates are never enough either, but you and this interiority will go on for a while. Vaginal exploration is mandatory in every peripartum recumbent cow and may lead to discovery of a decomposing second fetus. Damage to an infection of the wall of the vagina is common. Metritis and an associated toxemia can contribute to postpartum recumbency. What happens to the world when a body is a bag of stuff you can empty out of it? Errors, musculatures. Can I empty language out of me? What difference does it make how a thing dies? Consciousness. Nobody knows what that is. So I'm going to move on to lighter fare. You guys can ask me questions now, too. I'm trying to, please be brave at the end and say whatever you want. Coeur de Leon is a brand of camembert. Some of you may know. I don't know. I'm not the hugest fan of cheese, but there's a picture. This is the camembert. And it means lion heart or heart of the lion in French. And I feel like it's like a pub name a lot. Anyway, Coeur de Leon, I don't know, am I overdoing it on time? I want to tell you a little bit about Malamar, which is the publisher of Coeur de Leon, which I started with two really good friends. Malamar is also the name puns on a food, which some of you may know, the Malamar cookie. It's sort of retro now, I think it's a 70s, 80s thing, which everything else I'm working with, I don't know, it all goes together. The Malamar is a graham cracker with a marshmallow and chocolate coating. And it's only available 9 months out of the year because I think it melts quite easily in the hotter months. And so people who are really devotees of the Malamar buy them and hoard them like people do with Girl Scout cookies. So I like that because in a world where everything's made in factories, nothing has any season. or temporality anymore, and it's sort of charming that a mass-produced cookie would be a kind of seasonal thing, like a fruit. And Malamar is also a pun on the name of Mallarmé, whose poetry is filled with white foam, and for whom I guess I can think of no better spirit food than the marshmallow. But if it's chocolate coated, we can laugh more or something. I don't know. And Malamar also kind of sounds like seasickness, like Mal, Omar, Mar, Mare. And seasickness and like bad things, shipwrecks and all of that, that's all over Mallarmé too. So yeah. Coeur de Leon is unfortunately a narrative poem. It is a love poem. All of these like terrible genres, there's more terrible genres in it, but I'm too nervous to even tell you what they are. So I'm just gonna start reading it. The other night when I couldn't sleep next to you and I said I wanted to cry and you said I should, and I looked down and breathed, and then I did cry, and you tried to touch me, and you did, and you tried to kiss me, and you sort of did, and I was so scared that I love you and you don't love me. I felt stupid when I put my pants on, and I felt stupid when I put my shirt on, and I felt stupid when I went to the other room to get my book, Beware of Pity, by Stefan Zweig, the preamble to which I had read to you when I still thought we might fuck. And I felt stupid when your door slammed too loud behind me, but when I hit the night air, I was relieved. You read a lot. You have a hunger. I like it. Your hunger makes it possible for you to see things. You must have seen how stupid I felt, how helpless. Women. I don't know, Jake. I do not understand women. Right now, I feel like one. I don't know what women want, but I know that the ones I like are not the hags who put one arm around you. In this scenario, you are the younger woman, and say, you get to a point in your life. Fuck those bitches who try to poison desperate girls with their resigned and shitty worldviews. Women, they have got to feel desire. Me too, I've got to feel it. And your ex, or maybe you're back with her, I don't know, Emma? I read of some of what she wrote to you when I broke into your Gmail account. She's charming, a little shallow maybe, but clever. Undemanding, I guess. We are not very alike. You are sweet and condescending when you write to her. It is difficult to know anything. I guess she seems lovely. She has curly hair like me, but in this JPEG, it looks like she puts more emollients in hers. You call her Bunny. That's cute. Sometimes when I am straddling you, you say this ridiculous thing, Mama Llama. Sometimes you whimper and moan and pretend to cry. You say, oh, Ari, you make me feel so many emotions. I felt a lot of emotions too. I think that I do not like the girls who apologize like children if they ever act uncute. Sometimes I apologize. I apologize to you. Too bad I'm not stronger. I'd be worse. I'm gonna skip a bit. Oh, actually, you know what? I'm not going to skip that. Sorry, you guys. Emma works at a gallery one floor down from a gallery I worked at like 3 years ago. She is the gallery girl. I know what that's about. I was the gallery girl. I tried to like it. It was important to pretend to be interested in being near artists and art, as though proximity were tantamount to metonymy, which it isn't, not in real life. What's metonymy in real life? You rub up against something, some of its truth and incompleteness is transferred onto you, you carry it around on your body, maybe. Art, that fussed, trite shit rich people buy. When I worked upstairs from where Emma works, I was afraid of what it meant to exist alongside somebody else's idea of art. My heart was breaking. I never got good at affecting the blank expression of truly contemporary beauty. Also, I'm weird looking. I have used the words real, feel, When I worked for the gallery a floor above where Emma works, I wore mini skirts and strange dresses, and my boss, basically a fake and what the 19th century French called an arriviste, I can be pretentious because I'm talking about the art world, used to introduce me to collectors as her genius. Aside from that quirk, the strange thing about this woman was that despite the fact that what she wanted was fame and more money, she already had a lot of money. She had a curious appetite for ideas and adjectives, the thicker the better. Words, I got to use some in her place because some bizarre mental excess in her attracted her to them. Her insane brother fired me about 3 times. Anyway, I don't know why I'm telling you this, except that I think gallery girls have something to do with what some women want and do and are. What about gallery boys, which is to say art handlers? They count too. Bleh. One can try to fall for the idea that sitting and standing in a room with something in it somebody is willing to pay for is the same thing as having a heart, beliefs. The open system one passes through will find a way to take effect one way or the other. This firm notion, a pendant of the culture, such as it is. It felt so lame. Picking up the phone, acting pretty and disdainful when I'm neither, pretending that bullshit's something I know how to do when I'm so bad at it. Too nerdy and emotional, too fucking enthusiastic. Some people can make anything sound true. I've been a whore before too. Maybe it's because I always want to know about women that I've done these degrading jobs. Some women are so intense, Jake, you know what I mean? Intense enough they're never what they are, never merely. I don't mean some internet-ready self-reflexivity, self-irony, whatever people call it, as if a self were so fixed, just ironizing it could constitute a surge of consciousness. I fall for women who are beyond themselves, you, their situation, and everything. Those are the women I want to know about. Those are the women I want to know. Right now, I'm listening to Nico and considering feeling intimidated. I want to feel love. I loved you when you said, "It is horrible what has happened to Mediterranean culture." And I loved you when you said what I couldn't have tricked you into saying, that it was so much more intense, the sex and everything between you and me, than it was between you and her. I have never been the other girl before. It makes me sick with dread, but I can't stop myself from writing to you like this. It bothers me that your family is wealthy and that you pay a lot of money for telephone sex and webcam masturbating. When we watched clips of Apocalypto on YouTube with your friend Mikhail, I was surprised at how bored I was by them. Apocalypto is an awesome title, we agree. And Mel Gibson is like some kind of grotesque rendition of a stupid George Bataille, but his bloodlust in its excess is dull. Its veracity runs too headlong into the carnage or something. It doesn't exploit the eros of violent possibility enough. I told you some things I learned about Maya bloodletting rituals from this book called The Blood of Kings, Sinan bought for me at the Metropolitan Museum of Art, another place I used to work, about how it was kings and nobles, women too, who bled themselves in order to have visions. They pierced their shins, their tongues, their foreskins with lancets made of stingray spines, and they bled into special bowls of paper. The paper soaked up the blood. A vision came out of the blood. The vision is usually depicted as a serpent. Well, the serpent comes out of the blood, and in the serpent's open mouth is the vision itself. The noble people who bled themselves in front of the common people were supposed to bear their pain stoically. One relief shows Lady Zoc passing a thorned rope through the bloody hole in her tongue. As it fell, the blood was rubbed into the stone hieroglyphs on the walls of the temple, and 'cause everything's a hieroglyph in that world, it's impossible to separate blood, architecture, figuration, and pain from language itself. This is really interesting, you said. I played Let My People Go by Diamanda Gallis for you. This is the shit, you said. I guess I was trying to call your bluff, what you'd said about me being witchy and everything. That night I had called you because I wanted to see you and you were very amenable. You got beer. Your apartment is conveniently located. It took some courage for me to call you because you'd been kind of distant, and I saw the effort you were making to be pleasant with me while you tried to figure out what you wanted, how best to nudge me in that direction. It bothers me that you cut out American Apparel advertisements and tape them to your bedroom wall. You are writing a book called Mein Cock. It is about your love affair with a phone sex operator, among other things. When you told me the story of you and the phone sex operator, I was moved. After you read me about 50 pages of your novel, Humble Monster, and I told you it was a terrible novel, I did not mean to say it like that. I explained some things that I did like about it, some things I thought could be reworked. And I said that I hoped that you would write the story of you and the phone sex operator, how good she was at cocksucking, how shitty her life was, her poverty, fucked up family, how she hated her body, the love you shared. I felt for her, and you spoke about her with such elegant forthrightness. The week after school ended and I was in Germany with Sinan, I got obsessed with Nazi architecture and started to read Mein Kampf online until I got blocked by the authorities. I told you about it in an email on August 30th, and I feel that perhaps I am somewhere, in some small way, a part of what has inspired you to write this book, Mein Kampf. On the other hand, I think your prose is sometimes shaky, and following Hitler's might not be the best idea. I guess Kampf could stand for Kampf, struggle, which is pretty witty, or could be, but who knows where you're going to go with that. It's really none of my business. I forgot all about how we held hands so tight all through class, but then I remembered you were writing to Emma about how much you missed her and couldn't wait to see her during this time. I think Emma Bovary is named Emma because of some notion of English romanticism, Jane Austen, something like that. Emma is not a French name. I don't remember Madame Bovary that well, but Avital Ronell discussed it in her seminar today. Toward the beginning of the novel, dumb Charles Bovary's first wife dies, and Emma's father invites the widower Charles to dinner. Emma's father proposes that Charles go rabbiting with him, explaining that shooting a rabbit, getting off a shot, or something like that, in Paul Demand's revision of the translation by Eleonora Marx, might dissipate the tensions of his bereavement. Of course, it's not Charles's feelings Emma's father cares about. He just wants to get the transaction of his daughter's marriage over with. Anyway, it's a nice name, Emma. And the whole shooting a rabbit in order to relax enough to notice Emma thing, and how you call your Emma Bunny, well, I guess it's kind of a stretch, but I thought of you two today. I sent you that Vincent Gallo song, Honey Bunny, even though I knew it would make you think of her. Once Abigail called me Bunny in front of you, I guess 'cause I made a face, and my heart hurt 'cause I knew. Thank you.
Is this on? So do we have any questions for the poets? All right.
Okay. It's for Ariana. Hi. All right. Give you a moment. The selections from the technical manuals that you included in the cow, I noticed when you read from the cow how much more I guess just lengthy those passages were than the actual poetry you composed to kind of go under them were. And it seemed to me that it was working as kind of a ballast or something. And I was wondering, when you added those long passages in, whether it was kind of a organizational principle that you used before you wrote the poetry, or if it was kind of thrown in there afterwards. And
I think that's a great question, and I certainly did think of those quotations from the technical manuals as ballast, and in fact, that's the word I used in my head. There's a photograph of a pile of cows burning. It's not the cover. It's kind of a famous photograph from the whole mad cow situation some years back. And the poetry of Paul Celan is very concerned with smoke and air. And I felt like those wee poem parts or tatters under those ballast sections were so faint and weak, like smoke or something eviscerated, some kind of leftover. And they were composed sort of, I can't explain it other than like oscillation. The Cow is a strange book because I did like research for it. But I mean, it's full of, poems that I wrote when I was feeling something, not when I was like working hard to write poems or something. And so, but the research that I was doing also caused poems to be written. So it was a kind of oscillating process between the two. But there's plenty of, unfortunately, whole pages, page after page, in which there is no ballast. It's all just flimsy poetry that I wrote.
Well, I'll stop. You signaled a lot of change when you passed from book to book by saying lighter fare, but I think there are a lot of other, and then also by saying you were occupying some horrible genres, right? But the hugest difference might be the fact that The Cow is a book that's dominated completely by prose, whereas Coeur de Leon is resolutely lineated. In fact, they're often almost look like they were double justified, yet lineated, such an even line. And I wondered what kind of non-tidiness, what kind of mass and ravaged body of writing you admit differently when you are lineating as opposed to using prose as a genre.
That's a really interesting question. Coeur de Leon is a lyric poem. Its eye isn't as complex as the eye of the cow, and the cow uses an eye very concertedly as well. But Coeur de Leon is a kind of troubadour love poetry eye, and so the lineating, I have to confess, was kind of natural. It was written very quickly, probably in about 2 weeks with very little sleep, and then edited kind of maniacally and for about a month after that. And I did do some work with the line breaks when I was editing it, but lyric in the sense of something spoken, of something formal, and almost the sincerity of emotion almost overwhelmed by the formality of a kind of lyric utterance, even though it's basically free verse. So Coeur de Leon wants to have its cake or cheese and eat it too. There's a section of the book that discusses cheese and fermented things, and if you want, if I could feed it back, the lexicon of cheese and cheesiness and love and Gmail, whatever, if I could try to feed that back into the lexicon of the cow, I would say that Coeur de Leon is rendered or processed. It's a dairy product, like cheese, whereas meat and blood are different. They're interior and guts. But Coeur de Leon asks the question whether fermented things, which are refined and rendered, might even be more carnal sometimes and more overwhelming than the guts themselves. So I guess it's a question that the book is asking. Whether form can contain anything at all. I don't know if that answers. Come on, ask me a question. It'll just be more fun. For you, I mean, and for me. Or say something? Great.
What I noticed you're writing in what could be called, or construed, or I don't know, wrongly called a confessional mode, with the prominent I and the kind of autobiographical subject matter, I'm assuming. How did you confront the taboo of writing in that mode in the current poetic climate?
And here we are in the Citadel.
Yeah. Language poetry.
And happy to be here. Language poetry was really important to me and still is. I mean, My Life, Lynn Hijinian's My Life is one of my favorite books, among many others. But I think that the connection of the I to a confessional mode or confessionality or something is a bit hasty. I really like epistolary writing. I really like reading the letters of authors and the letters of people. I find fascinating, and I think that there's something extremely ethical about epistolary address. It's something that I love in the writing of Michel de Montaigne, who invented the essay. The idea of addressing someone, requires a great deal of force. You have to heave yourself up, and Coeur de Leon, I suppose, addresses this difficulty in question later in the book when it becomes more frantic and dramatic. I think that we live in a world in which the you or you are constantly being addressed by advertising and politics, not to mention YouTube. And also, the first person singular has been, I think, destroyed, or terrible things have been done to it. And the idea that my space, or the possessive, the first person singular, is a kind of field of rectangles in which you can express your creativity and compete with that of others or whatever. I think that for me, saying I and saying you is kind of like drawing an ethical line in the sand. And it means saying I with a great deal of humility and confusion, but care. And it doesn't mean I'm confessing my sins to a preacher and waiting to be absolved and telling you like what I did last night at the bar so that you'll think I'm either cool or at least pity me or something. I think that it's very, very difficult to address a person with your heart beating in your body and your whole being heaving up. And people still do it, and people write love letters to each other, letters of desperation or confusion or explanation, and that kind of transaction is kind of like, I sometimes feel like all we have left. And I love a great deal of poetry that does not say I and does not say you, but I feel like not saying either of those things is a luxury that I can't afford. If you need more explanation for that, I don't know. It might need more explaining. Yes? Likewise.
Yeah. So I noticed something that I started to draw circles around in my mind when you were talking were about these certain cultural things that are very present day and the audience reacted to them. You said like Gmail or YouTube. I think you mentioned some movies, titles that are around right now. And I wanted to know if you did those on purpose, why you think we reacted that way, and if you think that there's a certain timeless sense to what you're doing, or if you need to actually related to these different cultural things, like maybe did you like Elvis, hairdo, and then they would make it work.
Right. I think that's a great question, and it's something that I asked myself when a box of these books came from the printer, because in fact, as I wrote it, I was trying to be extremely careful and accurate and to deal with the material that was at hand, which included Gmail and YouTube and Apocalypto and all the rest, but also included a good amount of literature that was floating around in the transactions between me and this other person, and I guess the world around us. And I thought, I was looking at it and I thought, ew, like Gmail, YouTube, like this is gonna look like some calculated, snide attempt at contemporaneity or something. And if it ends up looking like that, oh well, I guess that's too bad for me. But I was trying to handle the material without being lurid about it. And I'm not sure that I succeeded, but that's what I tried to do. Does that answer your question? No.
I don't think I was so concerned with you trying to, like, you know, I think that when I listen to NPR or whatever, the people don't know how to wield those weapons. They'll be like, you know, on YouTube, they put up videos like that. What's happening here. I actually was thinking about whether or not, like, these different forces that are around you that you just happen to be next to affects maybe what you're talking about. And, you know, this idea that you break into a password in order to get to something, whereas before in other times you wouldn't. And that's maybe what this audience here was maybe reacting to, because we all could relate to that. Are these things that we all can relate to? And the fact that you also use these sugary, you know, buzzy ones that we all know about and use all the time that oppress us in this present day and age, was that helpful as opposed to, like, you know, when I'm at the automatic food machine trying to purchase money.
Well, let me say this. I don't think that the medium is the message at all. I think that strange feats of tenderness can be accomplished with unexpected devices. And there can be a great deal of tenderness involved in watching YouTube videos with someone. The other interesting thing about MP3s and YouTube is that, and Apocalypto is all of the references, all of the things that are transmitted through those media in Coeur de Leon happen to be either slightly out of date or just plain old. At one point, the speaker sends the song He's a Rebel by the Crystals, an MP3 of that was downloaded off LimeWire. So there's all of this, there's a lot of old and out of date things that are also housed in these media, and it's a very strange, it speaks of a strange relationship to time and presence. And that's what I find really intriguing, is that the medium may be new, but what is being sent over it, the transmission itself, is something old-fashioned or just plain old.
Okay, that helped. I don't know if I want to, like, tell you what I'm hearing from that, and I want to give other people opportunities to know.
If anybody else has a question. Is anyone else brave?
I have one. Can you pass that up there?
I'm totally standing too close to the mic. It's like one of the good mics that you don't have to, like, sit on. Well, anyway, sorry.
No, go ahead. This is kind of stream of conscious, but before, when you were talking about heartbeat and that kind of being the only thing, I was just listening to, I think it was Ginsberg's lecture on That's How Olson wrote, very connected to his heartbeat in kind of a tantric way. And I know that writers love these questions, but I'm wondering if you could speak a bit about process and, like, the physiology of writing for you.
Sure. I wrote both of these books in a tiny, like, rabbit hutch type room above where my friend Mark was living with his boyfriend, my friend Sundar, my friend Mark, who died a week and a half ago. I didn't have any privacy. I could hear everything that was happening in the other rooms, and everything enraged me, like all of the sounds. But that rage can be really useful. The Cow is a book that I wanted to be found in a drawer after my death. I thought, like, it would be like my like secret tome after I eked out like a pathetic like Henry Darger like existence with no friends and no money and no job and maybe a janitor job, and that I was going to be able to like achieve some kind of like grace by letting somebody else deal with like the pile of shit that I imagined it would become after I had like been like chewing it and like macerating it for my whole life. And so I was kind of disappointed when it like got the chance to be published as this like small little thing that was like not really gonna like make or break anybody's life, including mine. And so that was like an extremely physically tortured process. For part of it, I was actually starving, not on purpose, and I didn't realize that I was starving until after it had been happening for a while, and that created a really strange gastrointestinal panic, which I'm sure found its way into the whole thing. And the cow also, I mean, the idea of emergency, which Jasper mentioned, was something that was like really freaking me out through the whole process of writing that, because I thought, you know, like I love Michel de Montaigne, who like was this nobleman who like locked himself in his beautiful library and composed his great essays at the end of his life or whatever, but my life like sucked and everything was falling apart around my ears and I had no money and like I didn't have a decent place to live or anything. And I thought that, fuck, I'll never be John Ashbery. It's never gonna happen. I'll never sit there with my clean desk thinking that nothing takes up its fair share of time. Like, oh no, that will never be. And so I thought, like, I was just trying to find a way to do it anyway, even though everything was falling apart. And that's what, I don't know if that says anything, like what you wanted, like, did I do push-ups or something? And Coeur de Leon was actually, I was inspired in the old-fashioned sense. And I think that inspiration, I forget who was it, Jean Cocteau, or that guy who wrote Monsieur Test, Paul Valéry. I mean, they're all like totally like inspiration doesn't exist, and capitalism also says that inspiration doesn't exist, it's all work. And work is good, but I was inspired when I wrote that, for better and for worse. And I wrote it very quickly. I quit my job, and I took out a Stafford loan, because I'm in graduate school. So, yeah, I mean, whatever. It's better to like borrow from the man while you can. I don't know. But I had enough to eat at that point, and plenty to smoke and drink as well.
I think that's our fair.
Oh, Dodie has a...
Oh, there's one person right there?
Dodie?
Oh.
I was wondering, Ariana, you talked about using like kind of a cheesy, disenfranchised female form for Coeur de Leon, and then you have the cow, and you're comparing it to the cunt and all of that. So I was wondering like how you situate this work in terms of a feminist aesthetic.
Oh my. Well, the cow, I'm dismayed to admit, is certainly in many ways forcefully and maybe rigorously abject. And I thought when I was writing it, feminists will hate the book and will hate me because it's an abject book. And on the other hand, I think that lying, like when you are abject and saying that you're not or something, is quite dangerous. It's like how people hate their lives and live in shit and like won't say so, and how that's like how things go on sucking, if you will. And so I thought, I mean, I'm a feminist, so I thought, my life sucks and I'm abject and I'm gonna write this abject book. And also, the cow is about my mother, who is a doctor and a scientist, a researcher, and who's also homeless. and paranoid schizophrenic, and her life is abject. It's completely disenfranchised. It's completely without voice. And I feel that I'm tired of sort of aspirational, heroic modes in magazines and newspapers and everywhere. And I thought, if this magnificent creature who I know, who happens to be obsessed with Creutzfeldt Jakob, which is another little secret of the cow, could be so destroyed in this culture, then I have to say so. And I have to say so in the suffering way that I feel it. And I mean, I suppose it's like black people saying nigger or something. Like if I say cow, like that makes me like, I'm like reappropriating that term, but that's too simple, right? Like, I felt that it was a politically radical thing to do, to say how I felt. And I wasn't trying to be grotesque or extreme or lurid. I was really trying to say how I felt. And now when I read it, I think, God, this sounds so gothy or whatever. But so obviously there's something to goth too. Something deeply political and radical and feminist. And in Coeur de Leon, it's double-edged like cow. A cow is something supposedly sacred, but it's also this figure of disgust, and America is obsessed with killing it. Coeur de Leon is both a figuration of nobility and grandeur and a really cheap cheese. And how can I articulate anything without also kind of admitting its absurdity? I don't know. I believe that I'm a feminist, but I'm certainly not into like rah-rah, like hero praising, because I just think that life is so much sadder than that, at least for me. I don't know if that answers your question. Thank you.
That was heroic, though. So thank you to both poets. And although they're not 99 cents, come look at the Gerskian display of books up there. And I'm sure that Ariana would be willing to sign for anybody who wanted to. Okay, thank you. See you next week, hopefully.